On record.
Call to order the City of Lincoln City City Council meeting, December 12th, 2011. Roll call, please.
Mayor Anderson.
Here.
Gordon Eggleton.
Here.
Gary Ellingson.
Here.
Chester Norikis.
Here.
Roger Sprague.
Here.
Henry Quant.
Here.
And Alex Ward.
Here. Please stand for a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance. Nice to see an audience again this evening, and also the festive decorations. It's kind of nice. We'll have to make sure staff is thanked. It's thank you, sir. At this point, the next agenda item will be comments from citizens present. Comments from citizens present. The purpose is for citizens are allowed to present information or raise an issue regarding items not on the agenda or regarding agenda items that do not include a public hearing. A time limit of 5 minutes per citizen shall apply. I've asked the city recorder to utilize the light system so that speakers will be informed as their remaining time and so that we have consistency. As a general rule, this is not the time for an exchange of questions. However, at the conclusion of this agenda item, a counselor can discuss or raise questions regarding something presented by a citizen. As you come forward and be seated, be sure to speak right into the microphone and give your name and address, please. Daniel White.
Hello, I'm Daniel White. Thank you for letting me speak. The reason I came tonight, I had...
Daniel, would you give us your address, please?
Yes, I'm sorry,
Okay.
6433 Southwest Galley. That's in Color City. The reason I'm here tonight, I had put in an application for a VCB volunteer position. So I filled out my application, turned it in, and I got a letter back from the city, and they wanted me to sign it and return it. And I had a problem with that, a couple of them, in that they asked for things in the first place that I don't think that they had any business asking for. And along with that, it was the paperwork they gave me was contradictory. The beginning of the form asked for, or stated they were going to get credit reporting information, and then towards the bottom it had the criminal background check thing. And so I sent back a letter to the city. I believe I sent that to, or gave that to Kathy Steer. I may be mistaken. I think that's who I gave it to. Anyway, so then Roger Sprague had talked to me once after that and said that they really wanted that form that I had. They wanted that form filled out by me and returned, rather than the letter I sent them. I sent them a letter giving them permission to do a criminal background check on me and signed it, and I figured, you know, if they want that, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. That should suffice. Anyway, then later on, another council member, Mr. Eagleton, gave me this form. Now, the very top of this form, which I gave each of you, you can see the first thing on the paper in bold type is Fair Credit Reporting Act. So, you know, that kind of sets the tone for the document there. And then disclosure and authorization statement. Anyhow, they go on to ask for consumer report, credit capacity character, creditworthiness, education, personal characteristics, criminal background, mode of living. I don't think it's any of their business when or where I served in the military. They're not, the city isn't entitled to my record. They asked for my Social Security number on here. When I watch TV, which isn't very often, I see people on there telling me, don't give your Social Security number to anyone. And there are people, not to hurt anybody's feelings, that work for the city that I really don't want to have my Social Security number. So I'm really disappointed with the second form they came up with here. The first form, it had a little slip of paper that came with it that said, we're asking for this other stuff, but we're only going to go after the criminal background check. Well, now it looks like what they've done is give me the same form with a little excerpt in it about the criminal background check. Anyway, I think that if you read this thing, it says we're asking you for this, and then we're not going to follow through for it, but we want you to sign it anyway. I think it's wrong. I don't want to sign it. And there are other people who have interest in being on those committees that don't want to sign that either. And so not only for myself, but for other people who are willing to volunteer in this city, I'm also asking on their behalf that somebody take the 4 or 5 minutes it takes to type up a new letter, maybe run it past the city attorney or something, and get something more workable that someone who's willing to volunteer their time to help the city with would be willing to sign.
Okay.
That's
Thank you for coming forward.
pretty much
Thanks.
it.
Yeah.
You bet. Thank you.
Jerry Warner.
Oops. Took off here. My name is Jerry Warner, and I live at 1233 Lakewood. And the reason I'm up here tonight is basically for a couple reasons. One of them is to say some of you councilmen are finishing up your first year on the city council. Some of you have been here before, and some of you have been here for several years. And some of you people that ran for council and were not happy with the way things had been handled around here in the city, and I think that Lincoln City needs some changes in the future, and I know it takes about a year to kind of get your feet on the ground. But I also want to congratulate the mayor for the work that he's done with the Department of Transportation, because with his efforts, things are moving ahead on getting this stretch of highway finished down the Nelscott area that's been sitting there for such a long time, and also his work that he's doing on the 911 system, which without his help, I'm sure nothing would have happened. And I guess the big thing that I wanted to say to you, councilman, is the fact that you represent the people, the citizens of Lincoln City, and not government. And I think there needs to be a better rapport developed between the council and the people that you serve here. And remember, it's the people that elected you to your office, and we expect some support out of it. There's a lot of serious problems in this city and that need to be addressed, and one of the major one, of course, is urban renewal. The tax dollars that are being spent in urban renewal are just absolutely ridiculous, and that can be addressed at a different time. But anyway, when I talk to the people in the community here, just like Mr. White that was up here previously, he brought up some very interesting issues. And when I talk to other people, they say, well, I've got a real problem about this. I say, why don't you go up to the city council and talk about it? And they say, well, what good does it do? They just sit there and look at you, and you never get a response. You never get an answer. You don't know what's going on. Nothing ever happens from that point. And I realize that the way this is set up on your 5 minutes, that you doesn't allow for much conversation. The forms that I brought you up here tonight are copies of letters, and I'd like for you to take the time when you're out of the council meeting to sit down and read them. And this is an issue that's been going on all the way back into 2009. And as of this date, it still hasn't, the city hasn't completed their part of the bargain on this thing, and which I'll bring up at a further meeting. My problem, of course, like I say, started way back in 2009, and it was in regards to when I found out the reverse 911 system, 2011, when the reverse 911 system wasn't operating for Indian Shores, and some improvement's been made, but the rest of it has not been completed. Over the last 35 years, I have worked with cities, in fact, at least 8 different city governments, 6 county governments that I can remember very well, and 4 previous city managers. And my feeling as a citizen here, I have never felt that I couldn't get problems resolved like they should be. And I feel that the people that work for the city, the people that are doing the day-to-day work for the city, I cannot ever say one bad word about them, because they've been very, very cooperative, and they've always busted themselves to take care of problems that have come up. And so whether I'm talking to Kathy or I'm talking to one of the other people in planning, they've always been very, very receptive and tried their best to help me. But I do have a concern with the dictatorial and attitude and that I've received by top administration in this city. And I think that it's something that this city needs to address, and address now. I want to thank you for your time, wish you all a Merry Christmas, and I will be back to talk to you further about other issues that I need to address, but I know I don't have, my 5 minutes is gone. Thank you very much. Ho, ho, ho.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. Mr. Bob Hunt.
My name's Robert Hunt. I live at 1587 Northwest 39th Street in Lincoln City. I had no intentions of saying anything tonight until I went to a coffee break this morning. I had the wonderful opportunity to sit down and have a chat with Daniel White. And you've heard from Daniel White, and that's the reason you're hearing from me. Because I went on down to city manager's office, and Kathy was so helpful and gave me the subject. Oh, by the way, the subject is volunteerism. I took a look here, and I see that there are 21 vacancies. I think that's historic. And I think there's got to be some reasons. And one of the reasons I think I saw today was the form that Daniel was talking about. I got to share with you, there is no way in the world I would sign that form. And I would hope that no one else would sign it either, because the form doesn't even tell you who it's from. And I think the intended purpose, which was to do criminal background checks by you, the council, was a great idea, and it still is. But this is misunderstood, is what I'm saying. Is that as I read that wasn't the intent. Kathy pointed that out today. The intent is to have a form, but I have no idea why the Fair Credit Reporting Act disclosure and authorization statement had to get into simply saying it's okay with me if you go find out if I had a criminal background. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for coming forward. Anyone else who has not had the opportunity to sign up, this would be the time to come forward. Anybody okay? All right. Moving on then. We have next agenda item is the consent agenda. The consent agenda, these items are considered routine and may be enacted in one motion without separate discussion. Any counselor may request that an item be removed for separate discussion and action. The consent agenda includes number 1, request to read ordinance by title only. Number 2, minutes of meeting for November 28th, 2011. And number 3, franchise extension agreement, Falcon Telecable.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to pull number 3.
Okay. And at this time, I'd take a motion for approving the consent agendas, item 1 and 2.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion with a second to approve consent agenda items number 1 and 2. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed with a nay? Hearing none. Councilor Sprague, number 3.
This is our television franchise agreement, television company that provides internet and television and what have you. Problem with their operation in that their monthly bills seem to go up whether anything changes or not. And you can start with a contract with them, and the next month it's $5 more or whatever it is. And quite frankly, I'm sick and tired of it. And I know that there's no competition, and they really have no competition in this area. So we're just pretty much held hostage by whatever they want to do with their billings. And I just think we need to make a statement to them to make sure that they're billing properly. That's my beef.
Mr. Rucker, could you shed any, because this agreement
First of all, I won't disagree.
not asking you to take a position, but this is, the actual topic, though, is a resolution to authorize negotiation. Is that?
Well, I think more specifically, I think what we're trying to do is just extend the existing franchise agreement till July, I believe July, there's a date, July 15th, or until new agreements negotiated, whichever is first. I really don't know how much difficulty there's going to be in getting to a new agreement. I don't think, unless Joan is up on the legal issues, nobody in the government really currently understands what powers are left to the cities and which have been taken away. And specifically in regards to the newer technologies, voice over IP, phone, for example, the other services, the lines are getting pretty blurry, and I don't understand them. So I don't know what's going to be involved in renegotiating that franchise. As to the rates, I mean, I agree with what Councilor Sprague said, but we've been preempted by the federal government from virtually all rate regulation about 5 years ago, and it's just a guess. The last vestige of that was taken away when Charter petitioned the FCC to recognize the digital satellite services as effective competition. Once they were recognized as effective competition, then the last ability of ours to regulate only the basic service rate was taken away. So we have no rate regulation whatsoever that we're allowed to do. I think there are some service levels, like how long it takes to get hooked up to service, where the lines have to run if they're underground, et cetera. Those kinds of issues. Joan, can you weigh in on any of this?
I think the case law in Oregon and nationally has been clarified that the cities certainly have the authority to regulate the use of their right-of-ways. So to the extent that there is actual physical presence in the city streets, the city can regulate that. It's the nature of that regulation that is not completely open-ended. Now, the city has both regulation in its code, and your code also requires a franchise agreement. So we have that with this provider. But within that context, David's correct. I don't think there's much control over rates. There is to some extent control over service. Now, Charter has also been in bankruptcy, and I don't know where they are with that
I haven't gotten any
reorganization.
recent updates on that. It's a non-exclusive franchise, unlike natural gas, electricity, which are and trash are exclusive franchises. This is non-exclusive, meaning if somebody else wants to come in and there's capacity in the streets or on the poles, they can string the wires and offer competing services. That's rarely been done, and I think it takes a pretty substantial market before that would be able to attract a newcomer. Fiber might be an answer if, for example, if CenturyLink were to start converting to fiber, then they could potentially offer competing service levels. I think the only answer is competition, and I don't see that happening anytime soon.
My concern isn't the rates. My concern is that they stick to them when they contract to deliver their service at a certain rate. They tell you one thing, and the next month your bill's higher, and that's my concern. And
yeah, and
that's a business concern.
I understand. I don't know that we have the ability to regulate that or not. Well, on the renewal, we'll look into that specific issue.
The customer, and to the extent that any or all of you are also individual citizen customers of Charter, has the ability to maybe do more. There's a complaint form that the FCC keeps pretty prominently on its website. And we can bring that form to you if the council is interested. That's, I think, information we put out once before to the public, that there is a process and you can file these complaints, and they are apparently addressed.
Mr. Rucker, I guess I'm wondering, competition definitely is the answer and seldom, but is there, have you ever seen a community, a city do something to entice competition?
Well, I've seen, kind of. I've seen cities that have put in at their expense fiber networks that were then offered. I believe Monmouth Independence joint ventured such a thing. I haven't followed it closely recently, and I think there's other cities in Oregon that have done that, where they have installed fiber, made that fiber available for internet, for phone, for cable. I don't know the status of that, but of course it's a huge investment. That's the only incentive that I've seen used, and I don't know whether it's effective or not. I'll do a little reading on the subject.
So at this point, what's before us, though, is to extend the existing franchise agreement till July 15th, 2012, in order to allow for negotiation.
And of course, I will pass that complaint along if council wishes to endorse that from the council as a whole. Otherwise, I'll pass it along from a council member.
Say, Mr. Mayor,
Certainly.
I would like to relate my experiences, particularly this past year with Charter, and I'm not trying to have someone not think that what has been brought up here is not important, but my experience with the people that work for the company here locally has really been stellar. I've had more than a couple of different problems. None of them were directly Charter's fault. I mean, it was equipment fault that they came out and readily addressed. One of the situations was about a block, from my residence. And I felt that the people that came out to actually do that work went above and beyond what I could have hoped for, at least for the immediacy with which they reacted to it. So if we're going to pass something along or talk about, disparaging a company in some way, I just don't want it to filter through to the worker, the local worker here.
Yeah, what I heard was more complaint about a corporate strategy of
and
fees.
I understand that. I still I have friends or people that I communicate a tiny bit with in other places, and in some places you can be charged by the minute for internet. We're in difficult financial times right now, and so the amount that we pay for anything is noticed. I just like us to weigh it out relative to, the big picture before we think that we're being taken advantage of in some way. Maybe there is a reason for us to make part of this statement, but from where I sit, I think I'm getting good service, and I appreciate it.
I just wanted to clarify, since the letter actually asks for two things, and the letter refers to a draft new agreement, and at the same time it also refers to continuing the existing one until July of 2012, and I believe on the consent agenda we're simply asking your confirmation for the latter.
Correct.
Not to adopt a new agreement.
Yeah, we're just the franchise extension agreement. So we have before us, I'd entertain a motion to approve the franchise extension agreement. Certainly.
Madam Attorney, did I hear you say that we have an ordinance that requires us to have this franchise?
Yes.
Thank you.
It requires the provider to have a franchise in order to use your right-of-ways. They have to enter into an agreement with the city.
So if we were to turn this down, that would simply mean we no longer choose to have charter operating in the city?
Possibly, yes.
Thank you.
So you have a franchise agreement that is out of date, running, and this is an agreement to extend so that negotiation can occur. So it clarifies that the existing agreement is in place while we're negotiating.
Yes.
I might add that this is a long series of extensions that we've had on this, years' worth of extensions on this. This is not new. I mean, we do this every year, or a couple times a year.
I think for 6 years. I think we've been extending for at least 6 years.
And that has never troubled me, because the franchise, I don't think we wish to enter into a franchise that grants charter rights that we don't have to, and that's a big job to figure that out. They always present contracts for our review that are pretty favorable to charter. And in the past, when we've looked at getting special counsel or consultants to dig into this, it's always been pretty expensive, and it's never been a disadvantage to us to extend the existing contract. Council can call an end to that and when you wish.
You have a motion on the floor.
No, just a call for the motion.
A call for a motion, I'm sorry.
So we have an item in front of us, one motion one way or the other. Some action?
I will make a motion. I just wanted to bring that up because of my dissatisfaction with what's been going on. I realize that if we don't extend this, that nobody in Lincoln City has internet or charter or cable or anything else. So I will make the motion that we go with the franchise extension agreement to July of 2012.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
We have a motion to approve the franchise extension agreement till July 15th, 2012 with a second. Is that a voice vote or?
Yes.
Oh, roll call?
Roll call.
Roll call.
I'm sorry, you don't need a roll call.
Oh, okay.
Ayes and nays is fine.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed with a nay? Hearing none. Thank you. Next item of business is special order of business. We have a contract extension, Devil's Lake Creature. Heidi Erickson, please come forward. get you up here in front of everybody.
I love this. I'm Heidi, and I live at 4310 South Earth Creek Road in Lincoln City.
And you have, in our packets, we've received a great deal of information about the creature you're creating. 3 of us have actually visited your site and visited the creature under construction. And I think the request, because of the contract, a request is for extension of time.
Yes.
And so council has seen and read the packet. It's an extension of time to allow the creature to be completed. And actually, Councilor Norikis and Councilor Eggleton and myself last week visited the creature under construction. Heidi's the artist. And so we got a tour and got to look at it. Questions of council from your packet that you might have of Heidi?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Mayor, but I would like to state, from having read the council packet information, of having Let There Be Arts become involved as a side entity to this, I think has some real benefits, considering that, children are going to be able to see, what goes into an art project and then see an art project after it's installed. So I have absolutely no problem with extending the time frame for getting this project completed and its installation.
Right.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I have no problem with extending the time.
Okay. Why don't then, if there's no questions of the artist...
unless you'd like to say something, but if not...
I would just, one thing I wanted to thank the 3 of you who were able to come out to the studio and look. I very much appreciate that. And I think that you're being more than fair. And I also thank Councilman Ellingson, I usually just call you Gary, for all of your counsel as well. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I think the appropriate motion would be to allow or direct the contract amendment, have Mr. Hawker be able to execute the contract extension. I would suggest that we maybe amend that further out to the end of April, because there's no reason to have a completed creature until we're ready to install it, and I'm betting the weather would be better for May and June. So if it's appropriate...
That's really good thinking, Mr. Mayor.
Then I wouldn't feel bad about leaving it in the artist's barn for the rainstorm. The motion would be to direct Mr. Hawker to extend the contract for delivery of the completion of the creature until the end of April 2012.
So moved, Your Honor.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to have Mr. Hawker extend the contract time for completion until the end of April 2012. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Thank you.
Thank you,
Sit.
thank you,
Sit.
thank you.
Stay out of the weather. And
That was me.
we have Habitat for Humanity. Was Ron going to handle that? Or?
No, Ron is out of the country.
Oh. Well,
I'll handle it for you.
all right.
In, I think it was 2002, the city provided 5 lots that it had in its land bank, buildable, what we thought were buildable lots to Habitat for Humanity. They built on 5 of them. They have a note on paying the rest. At the time, we thought that they might be able to build on all 5 lots, but they researched the 5th lot. We had to come back to council at one point and say, It doesn't look like that they could economically build on that lot, and I think at that time the council, 2006 council, authorized them to sell the lot and pay off the note. They haven't been able to do that. They would like to return the lot to the city and cancel that part of the note. That's all that's before you tonight. If you agreed to that, then we would accept the lot, amend the note. We may have to come back to council for that amendment, and put it in our inventory. Then at some point you would need to decide what to do with that lot, whether it's going to be open space, whether or not we're going to sell it, whether or not it would be a Lincoln County land trust or some other use by the city. We're not prepared to make that recommendation tonight.
Questions of council? Mr. Rocker, pretty cut and dry.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes?
I had a question and a thought. Apparently, just so I know that I'm understanding this properly, this particular lot was found to have topographical challenges, and to have them be corrected, somebody in our city engineering or somewhere is estimating that it might cost $30,000. And so, while I'm not opposed, I mean, Habitat cannot, for obvious reasons, use that for a development site. But I'm just trying to figure out a way to where they could. I know in that same area, and probably the problem wasn't nearly as significant as what is being described to us here, but Habitat got one of the local contractors in town to donate a lot of labor and just charge for materials only, and the problem was then rectified. And so if we were to ask Habitat, I mean, number one, time is not pressing. If we take this lot back, we're not going to be able to sell it, at least right away. If Habitat could find out if they could mitigate the problem or have it be mitigated, and we could then take it off the money that is owed to us or somehow participate with that, I would rather see a Habitat house on that lot eventually, you know, for the city than to take a lot back that has problems. And I don't want to have our problems be Habitat problems, but I think Habitat would be in a lot better position to do what I'm trying to describe than we would.
I think they've made, I don't know to what extent they have tried to deal with this problem. I know that they have tried. I know that they don't want to pay taxes on it anymore. And I know that they've made a request that we accept it back. I guess we can refuse and ask them to research it further, but
Well, maybe one of the problems is they know they owe, or they, in part of their equation, their reasoning they would pay us money, $20,000.
Well, it's a zero interest loan, so they're not losing anything by holding on to it other than taxes.
If we were to be able with that $20,000 to participate in repairing the topographical challenge, if the contractor was willing to donate some of his time. I'm just trying to figure out a way to put a house on there that somebody that needs it can benefit.
Sure.
And maybe it's too risky. Maybe that's the answer, that this situation is just something that once the house is on there and then something goes wrong, then you really got a problem. So I don't want to get into that either, but...
Well, we can hold this in abeyance and research the problems further. The staff member that was involved in this a lot at the time in 2006 is no longer here. We can reopen the file and figure out what that lot needs and what we think it would cost to fix it, if that's your direction.
I guess I'm wondering, Councilor, the value of it remaining in place under contract with Habitat, who clearly has stated they don't want to deal with it. isn't that your interpretation as well? That they don't want to deal with this property for whatever reason? It's beyond their scope and kind of stuff. So would we not be in a better position to do something else with it, i.e. the land trust, or take a look at, I don't know the property at all, but
It's up there in Spyglass, and I only thought that because if Habitat were to go to somebody and say, hey, could you help us out, if I was in the business where I could help out, I would be more likely to do that than if the city came and said, would you help me out, and then I'd...
Well, but what we may be able to do is better understand what needs to be done and then assist in the fixing the lot if that's what's needed, and find whether it be land trust or Habitat or someone else where we're willing to take the time, and Habitat, I'm interpreting, can't take the time to fix the problem.
But we don't know if it's time or the fact that they would then owe us $20,000.
Right.
And if we would say to them, hey, maybe of the 20 we'll put 10,000 towards the repair of this problem, can you help with
So what would you like to do with this?
It only gave us one option, and
Right.
that's the problem. So I'm sorry I burned up all this time.
Well, no, but we don't have to accept at this time. We don't have to take action on it.
Would it be within our power? No, that would be a county to stop the property taxes. That would be a move the county would have to make, right?
Well, of course, if we have title to it, and it's not being used as a profit or private dwelling, then there are no taxes. But Habitat is paying taxes on it. I don't think there's anything we could do to stop the taxes.
Okay, I would be willing to go along with what is being suggested, but if Mr. Hawker could feel them out again, the lot will still be there.
Correct.
And
it's it would be in our domain.
I hope that we can make it available to them in the future. I hope that they could work out a solution to what I'm reading, because I just can't believe that there isn't an answer to this.
If you're talking about some time to have a discussion, what I hear you saying is that there might be an option of actually contributing some funds to Habitat. The other alternative might be to use those funds to actually pay the taxes, if the issue is carrying the property until they can do it profitably.
I don't think the issue is cash. It's the value of the...
Right, I understand.
Yeah, I wasn't looking at transferring any cash.
Mr.
Mayor.
Mayor.
Councilor.
Another solution, maybe not palatable, but one would be to forgive the note, and then they keep the property, and we don't have to worry about it.
Well, in a roundabout way, that's really what Gary was talking about, was offsetting whatever cost to get the land into a condition of being buildable, take it off the $20,000. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I realize that $20,000 was the initial value of it, at least at the time, but the note is for $20,000, and do we want another piece of property that we got rid of it once? So I wonder if we need to bring it back.
Well, I'm betting we got rid of it as Habitat was under a building push, move, and they were near each other and wanting to, move. Not being here, I don't know what went on.
I was on the council at that time, and part of that giving that property to Habitat, it was, the city had an PU.
Is a Bancroft.
It was a Bancroft sale up there. There was a huge big development, the Spyglass, and the contractor went belly up, and we ended up getting five lots out of that. So we felt that the best place the best use of that was Habitat.
Right.
So that's how this all came about. And I don't know that we want that piece of ground back. I'm just thinking that we might be better off to leave it with them, and it goes on the tax rolls, and just forgive the note. Then they can find a way to make it buildable.
Well, rather than making that decision tonight, let's not accept the offer to reverse the transaction
Right.
and maybe explore if perhaps you and Gary wanted to explore with Habitat what some options might be, if that would be appropriate.
Well, I think it would have to be Mr. Hawker.
Well, I think he could delegate that to you. You know, I'd be happy to.
I have plenty on my plate.
There you go.
Okay.
Okay?
Fine with me.
Okay. All right, so why don't we just hold it, come back, you guys visit with Habitat.
I suggest they visit with Ron Tierney first, because he's more familiar with the situation than I am.
Yeah. And then we can bring it back.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And by the way, there's a local gentleman here by the name of Hathaway Cornelius, who is a member of their board. I think they have a house in Nesquin, and they spend a good deal of time in Arizona, but we're in contact with him, and we could have him weighed in as well.
Okay. Well, we'll just let you guys do some more research and include Ron Tierney for some background, and then give us the high sign, and we'll bring it back on to council action. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Department committee reports. Parks Department.
Well, Lila's taking her seat. I refresh everybody that when Ron Ploger retired as Park and Recreation Director, I felt that we needed to go through a period of time without that position being filled, and for financial reasons, not only because of the general fund budget, which part of his salary was being charged as recreation, and Parks maintenance budget was hurting, and I felt we had to compromise and keep that position vacant for some period of time, knowing that it would be an additional load on some people, and there would be some difficulties it would face along the way. What we did was the community center director essentially is handling recreation under the guidance of our HR director. The parks maintenance is being handled by the parks supervisor under the direction of Lila Bradley, our public works director, and parks planning, long-range parks planning, grants, etc., being handled by the planning department, by our senior planner in the planning department. And she would have been here tonight, but I believe she's out of town. So Lila's going to give you at least a partial on park activities.
Yes, I think Richard's going to take over for Deborah's.
For Deborah?
For Deborah's
Okay.
part of it at the end of mine. And mine is fairly lengthy, because when I started overseeing the parks maintenance, I did a tour with Gary Newman. He's our parks maintenance supervisor. And we also have Jeff Beatty. He's our parks maintenance lead. And we have Rick Rader. He's senior parks maintenance. And we have Billy Weitzel, who is parks maintenance worker. And then we have a couple of seasonal workers, Fred Williams and Mike Adams, and they come in May and leave in October. But they're here during our really high season, and they work really hard. And I've been really enjoyed. I've also been attending the Parks Board meetings, and that is one of an excellent board, in my opinion. They do a great job for the city. And so in my report, I was going to start off, I did do a couple charts that Ron actually gave a really nice presentation in February before he left, showing from 1990 to present the differences in the parks, and I'm going to go over just a little bit of that. But to start with, I want to talk about some of the things that were budgeted. I did the budget with Gary this year, and quite a few of these things are maintenance, and then some of them are also a little bit more on the capital side for the Parks Department. And so far this year, they have treated all of the wood structures at the Regatta Parks Playground, which is pretty extensive since everything there is the leather park. And then they also added new soft material that's was placed on the playground. And so they did one full semi-load of this product, and it's an engineered wood fiber that is a fall cushion for children on the playground, and it's also fire retardant. And they spread 10 tons of fertilizer on lawns, and that's a slow release type fertilizer. They put 10 tons of lime on lawns, and that's an agricultural lime, so it has less dust than some of the other lime products. And they are also right now working on pressure washing restrooms, so when the weather goes bad, they do as much as they can as far as that type of maintenance, and not quite so much on the grass and plants. And so they continue that until they can't do that any longer. And then they've also taken over the living wall, which is near the sidewalk at 30th Northwest 30th Street. And that one it's a little bit of a maintenance issue, but the plants are doing really well, and so they're taking care of that for us. They're still mowing and trimming lawns. This was really a little bit more in October, and so now they're not doing quite as much. And so they go in and they do all the trails and cut those back for the last time this time of year, and they inspect them. They periodically inspect those trails year-round. And they did some new dugouts, roofs, and drainage for the K3 ball field, which is the small field at Kurtz's Park. And they did some riprap work down at Canyon Drive Park, some of the parks improvements they did there in the past. They pressure wash all the hardscape locations, the gazebos, the plazas, the shelters, the garbage cans and restrooms. And earlier this year, they finished the tennis complex, resurfacing that, which they couldn't do until the weather changed. We had some pretty bad weather last year, and so I had quite a few phone calls from tennis enthusiasts saying, when is that going to be finished? And so we just had to wait for the weather, and then they got it put back together again. And then this was the 1990 parks facilities compared to the 2011 present, and we had 33 acres. In 1990, we now have 41.5 acres of parks facilities. And the list of these facilities, I did a tour when I first started working with the Parks Department, and it was amazing how many locations that they take care of. And so what I'm going to do is give you a visual tour. I have quite a few slides, and I'll go through them, rather quickly, but it gives you an idea of what this parks maintenance crew does. Okay, and this is open space trails. In 1990, they had 19 acres, and now they have 356 acres. And those are all locations that they visit, not daily, but I think they have like what they call the run. They have 71 stops that they make on this run through the city. And then they have, as far as facilities, parks, parking lots, landscaping, they went from 5 in 1990 to 34 facilities presently. And then staffing, in 1990, they had 3 full-time and 2 summer seasonals. Now we have 4 full-time, and this year we only had 2 summer seasonals, and we had 1 person move to the community center. And then the community center is also considered, a park, and so we have their maintenance workers that actually are at the community center, but are funded through the Parks Maintenance Fund. And then this shows their run time, 2,473 hours for a year. Parks maintenance is 5,309 hours. Open space and trails, 297 hours. Beach access is 130 hours. Public facilities are 1,846 hours. And then the miscellaneous can be probably vacation time or sick leave time and different things that people are off. And then I have one map showing on the left the 1990 park system, and on the right the actual 2010 park system. So you can see how many additions, the open space pops out the most as far as what's been purchased through that Open Space Committee. So it kind of gives you a good idea of the trail system. It shows the trail system along West Devils Lake Road, which is this section. And we've had some talks about that before. And then I'm going to move on to just showing you all of the park areas. And it's pretty impressive. Anything these guys touch really turns golden. The first is a wall on West Devils Lake Road Trail, which is almost complete. That's one. Last time I think I came in, I showed it to you with orange fencing in that location. So it's been completed. And then this is another view from the north end of that. And then this is heading down toward that section. And this is Sam Point Park. One of the things I did on the committee, we went over a list. I went over a list with Gary Newman on different things that we could possibly stop maintaining. And it was a difficult list. We haven't stopped anything yet because it would be more work to let it go, during a slow economic time than it would to go back and have to rebuild it again. It's just less expensive to keep it maintained, but this is just beautiful park. And this is just across the street from that park on Sandpoint. And this is our Holmes Road Park with the boat dock and small restroom, and one of our sewer pump stations is also in that location. It's on the very end of Holmes Road. And there's Wacoma Park, and that's one of the only playgrounds that were in the city. They only have 3 playgrounds, one at Regatta and one in Color City, and this one at Wacoma. And then this is just another little green space over on Northeast 6th Street that they maintain. And then this is our cell tower up on Northeast Orr and 17th. And this is across from Wacoma Park down on Northwest Jetty Street. And then they're maintaining the D-Lake School lawns. And this is the police department. And then this park was never brought up to any city standard. It was parking lot. It's down on Southwest 50th Street. And it's the old Hershey's location. And so we've just fixed it up enough so that it can be overflow parking for all of the summer events. And then this is next to Moe's. These are wood benches that they have to take apart every year and sand all the slats on those benches. So we're trying to look at something a little more lasting to put on those. And then that's the Kurtz's Ball Field. It's a large field. That's the tennis courts behind Dorchester House. This is here at City Hall on the west side of City Hall, the Vic Hill Memorial Park. And this is the Southwest 32nd Street parking lot and restroom building right behind the Nell Scott Strip. And this is the new community gardens. And so the parks crew maintains all of the plants outside the fence, and the community garden group takes care of everything inside the fence. And then they have the rest of that parking lot too. It's a large parking lot. So they maintain all of the vegetation there. This is Northwest. It's about 33rd Street. I think it's at about 33rd Street beach access. And then these are the flower baskets on 51st Street in Taft, and they maintain and take care of those all summer long. And then all of the bulb outs there as well. And then I did some of the nice books that the Urban Renewal Department did, showing the Josephine Young. This just is a nice way to look at these. They're all combined, and that was an Urban Renewal project years ago. for the Cutler District. And there's the restroom at the Taft, and that's the one at 50th Street with the large parking lot there. And this is Southeast 3rd Street parking lot. And we have the Highway 101 sidewalks, and that was in the D-Lake District and then in front of City Hall here. And this is the Northwest 16th Street Plaza. And so they maintain all of this vegetation. And then they also maintain the restroom building and garbage and whatever vegetation on that Northwest 15th Street. That's the only street that you can actually go down and take your car onto the beach. And then the Siletz Bayfront. So that's showing the dock, which the city is in charge of maintaining, and the restroom building. And then this is the Dee River Open Space Park. And the Taft Commons Street, and so they maintain portions of around the glass foundry. And then the community fireplace and picnic shelter, so they maintain that. And then this is showing the island in Highway 101 in Taft, and they maintain that as well. And I think it's been groomed down quite a bit since this picture so that it's safer for traffic. And then these are the Cutler trails that they maintain. And the Canyon Drive beach access and parking. And this is the Siletz Bay Park restroom building. And they were out there before Memorial Day this year, just trying to they really focus on all of the visible spots through the city so that when visitors come there, they're in the best shape that they can get them in. And this is the little what they call the Sprint parking lot, and that's also in Taft, right off the highway. And that's the end of that one. So so they're a pretty amazing group for that many guys. And then Richard has another portion of this too.
Before you go away, Lila, just a couple of questions. Watching the pictures, I can't help but recognize that we're still enamored with green, weekly cut grass everywhere. Mm-hmm. Whether we use the ground for anything or not, it must be a standard that we somehow have as a group that we ought to have. Has there been any research as to what it would cost to convert away from grass that you have to fertilize and cut every week, and how many years to recover from to something else?
I've been talking with Gary about that, and it's still a lot of maintenance. Any type of shrubbery or seagrass. We did the seagrass up by the Bank of America, and that's doing very well. And then on our island, but it would still take quite a bit of maintenance. So I can come back with something for you on that.
Well, I'm just betting that part of this is probably a preface for 6 months from now when we look at budgets. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm throwing out mine too, thinking we ought to be looking for ways to reduce our costs, still maintaining, but maybe we have to look a little differently. Mm-hmm. And just change our standard. And I don't know if we've looked into it, and that's really all I'm raising.
Yes, I've been discussing it with him.
Because I think for me there's some logical ones as you put around the police building, around all these angles and cut, our own right here in front of City Hall, and I knowing what it's like to cut grass because I gave it up. It's expensive.
Mm-hmm. And it's nice. It looks nice, and the parks, in the parks settings, it's nice because people can actually sit on the grass and enjoy it. But there's certainly some that we can take a look at.
Other questions on that area for Lila? Go ahead.
Lila, I didn't realize we maintain the dock down at 51st Street, 50th Street.
We do.
That's a large piece of maintenance, isn't it?
It is, and it's not in the best condition it could be in. It's something that we need to look at a little bit closer.
And are we looking at replacing that in the future?
I think that needs to really be a discussion, and what I can do is probably another presentation of what condition it's in now, and put a look at it to see if it's how much it would cost to really replace a lot of the boards, and a lot of them are uneven, and it does need some work.
Yeah, I'd
and so I think an analysis of that as one of our budget items, I can bring something back.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Townsend, must be you, huh?
Okay.
Thank you, Lila.
Thank you.
I'll be brief. As Mr. Hawker mentioned, the planning department, in particular, Deborah Martson, is handling long-range planning for the Parks Department. It's consisted principally lately of some work relating to the Head to Bay Trail, which you see here. Also, we have, as you know, gotten a Transportation and Growth Management grant for a bicycle and pedestrian planning project, which is not totally parks, but it does tie into the park system and the Head to Bay Trail effort, and that's underway now. We've had several meetings of the project advisory committee and technical advisory committees and so on. So we're proceeding with that. And there'll be a public meeting coming up next month in this room for the next step in that. We have also been looking at grant opportunities. This is West Elves Lake Boulevard. The Head to Bay Trail up in this area goes into the Villages of Cascade Head property, was in. Also down along here where it's adjacent to the Beacon Crest Apartments is in, but there's a gap between there, and there's another place on the existing trail where the need to cross a wetland, and there's a gap there. We have been applying for grants and looking into that. On that second gap where we have to cross the wetland, we did apply for a grant and didn't get it, but we're looking for other opportunities there so we can complete that segment of the path. As you know, also in the past year, we've worked on rezoning park and open space properties that weren't zoned for park and open space, and I'll just you've seen these before, I'll just run through them quickly. You can see the extent of them, the spyglass and so on, the 72 acres there, and some smaller holdings, just get them into the proper zoning. Down in the Taft area, this Fish and Wildlife, part of the National Wildlife Refuge system, and Lincoln County space down here immediately adjacent to Taft, to Cutler City, I mean. And also, we've been working on the Tree City USA project for the city. This was just recently doing a tree planting for Arbor Day, and there's kids working on the tree planting, and so we'll be continuing on that sort of thing and the planning in general for the park system. That's all I have. I'll hit it briefly.
Any questions of Mr. Townsend? Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. All right. Next order agenda item is City Manager Report.
I was trying to get to the mic in time.
Before
Could I follow up on that just real briefly? Your question on grass goes well taken, and I think it goes beyond looking at each area to saying what can we do to cut down the maintenance in these areas. But I also think that there's some areas that we might want to take a look at as to whether or not we want to continue to maintain. And I'm not saying that there's any conclusion on this. I would like to see the Parks Board take a hard look at all of our facilities, one by one, maybe even take some public input on it. Sandpoint, for example, out of the city, is it used by our residents or is it used by our visitors? Either one would qualify us to continue maintenance. If it's used by neither, for the most part, it's way out of our way. It's a seasonal park, but it requires maintenance. So I think that's one that we need to figure out who's using it. Is it worth our expenditure to do that? Holmes Road Park restroom has very little use. Those are the kind of things I think we really do need to take a look at, because we know the budget's challenged. So we'll continue that effort. It's just not number one on anybody's list right now, but it's not dead either. So we'll continue to do that.
Good. Thank you. All right, then.
I'd like to comment briefly on the vacation rental dwelling consensus builder. Excuse me. I put this on the agenda mostly to give you an update and a progress report, but hopefully maybe to get some direction from council on how we conclude the process. Normally, in most consultants, staff goes through the proposals, makes a recommendation to council, supports it, council votes. This one's going to be a lot more high visibility, a lot more community impact overall, and my sense is that council wants to have a pretty close look, close hand in that selection. And so what I'm really looking for is how you might want to proceed. Now, the next step, I think, and the one that we've started on, is to just do a quick review of all the proposals, rate them. There's a team of staff that will do that, give you a preliminary report. Here's the 7 that we've got. Here's what staff thinks of the paper that we've seen. No interviews, no reference checks, just the paper. Then the question is, what's next? And there's a lot of different ways to handle that. One way would be a committee of council, work with a couple members of staff, go through them again, pick finalists to interview, schedule the interviews, get them in here. That would be the most expeditious thing, since we don't have a meeting now between now and early January, to get something moving so that maybe come January would actually potentially even have a recommendation. Mm-hmm. Another would be to have a council workshop and go through them. Again, I'm assuming that council wants some pretty good involvement in this process, because that consultant's going to be key. I don't know what other solutions there are. If you have some direction, give it to us. If not, we'll give you our report and wait to hear back.
Does council have some thoughts right away? Councilor Sprague?
Just one, among others. I think one of the best gauges is references on previous projects.
Sure.
And I would think that what we would want to do, or should probably do, is check as many of those as possible, because the applications that we get are nice flowery applications with a whole lot of backpacking and or slapping themselves on the back. I mean, and when we get it from the people who actually had the service, we get a much better idea of what we're dealing with. So I would push really hard for an extensive check of references on them.
Well, I agree with the references being. Now, this stool has 3 legs. It has what's on paper, what they've actually done, what their qualifications are, etc. The references is an equal leg of that stool, and an interview to see how they're going to interact with the council, the community, is the 3rd leg. I would hate to spend the staff time to do references on 7. My assumption is that once we go through those, there's going to be a number, I don't know what number that is, that jump out as being, these people are qualified. Now let's find out how they did. So we could do that part report to you and then commence reference checks on those in the interim, or again, but I absolutely agree with you. References are critical to this. It doesn't matter how well they interview or what's on that piece of paper if they failed at everything they've done. It doesn't matter.
That's right.
Great. Gary, did you have a comment? Were you?
I wasn't going to make a comment, Mr. Mayor, but I have had absolutely no experience in anything like this in my life, and so I'm reliant on you that have, and on Mr. Hawker, and want to learn. I want to do what makes the most sense, but I am not going to know how to do that until I see how this starts to unfold and then receive direction from somebody.
Well, Mr. Hooker, I like the idea of the team going through them and kind of putting it on a grid, because I agree with you. I think out of the 7, 3, maybe even 4 will jump right out. And for then us to take a look at those and, you know, move from there. And I'm more interested in not taking so much time, you know, months on end to figure out a consultant, but be thorough, but move it as speedily, if that's a word, as we can, to get it to the kind of recommendation table. And maybe what we'll find is, for heaven's sakes, 5 out of the 7 are really, and so we may have to come back to council and ask for, you know, a different process, because it's going to be a lot longer to take reference checks and everything else.
Well, then, why don't we, we'll do the matrix and the evaluation, and furnish that to council. We'll also copy you on all the proposals, just so if you want to go through them, I think they average about 10 pages each, so it's only 70 pages of stuff to go through.
Smaller than our packet.
And then in that, we'll make a recommendation on those to reference check, and just email you all that information out, and we could begin those reference checks, and then we'll check in with you.
Yeah, I think that would.
Does that work?
Be pretty telling, right, Councilor Warren? Good. So, good.
So we'll make sure you all get the package. I'm saying within a week or 10 days we'll have gone through a first run-through and send you that report and a copy of all the proposals and give you where we think we're at that point.
Do you have any comment, just observation? I was of the 7 who sent in application, not the quality, but I guess I was kind of surprised of the number. Pleasantly pleased.
We went
from all over the country.
Well, we beat the drum pretty good on this one, because I think it's a unique opportunity, and we beat the drum. We advertised locally, we advertised in the Journal of Commerce. Where else, Richard? Where do we advertise? Online, et cetera, et cetera. But and then I think we contacted those that we knew had experience in this area, and there was a lot that we contacted that didn't respond. So, but yeah, I think that's why you saw 7.
Good. Well,
I mean, the worst. I just would hate to have come to you with 1.
Right. I would have too.
Okay. I thought that would be a failure. So
thanks for getting it to this point.
We'll report.
Okay, sounds good. We'll look forward to reading, holiday reading.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
What else might you have?
We've begun sending out letters to Roads End on the 60-day letter. Last week and this week we sent out 31 letters so far, and we'll continue to do that. I'm just guessing about 20 a week, just so the people out there know that they are coming. I mentioned to council in a written update, but I just want to mention for the public, because it's been in the paper, that we did a 800-foot bypass on the old Schooner Creek main. The section that was leaking, that we knew was leaking so bad, we could hear it leaking, but it was buried under a hill with a lot of large trees, and we just didn't want to dig into that hill. So we used that as an opportunity also to see what our city crews could do to install a smaller main, and now have some good cost numbers on what that would take. I've notified all the property owners, all 8 property owners on Schooner Creek, that would like to meet with them, and I've given them 3 meeting dates, times, and waiting to hear back from them. 1 in December, I believe 2 in January, to try to come up with a plan to present to you on how we get that whole main replaced. A reminder to the public that we won't have a meeting unless there's an emergency, I guess, on December 26th, which would be a normal council meeting day. If something comes up to where we need you, we'll contact you and see if you want to do it on the 26th or an alternate date. And then we'll go through whatever public process we have to do to call that. I don't expect that to happen, but you never know. It's also been reported in the paper that Bi-Mart did not build their building to LEED standards as was required by the sale contract. And that's truly unfortunate. I've asked Bi-Mart to propose something in the alternative that would be a responsible alternative to that condition. They've made a brief proposal I furnished to council. I didn't get much feedback from council on that, although I did get some excellent feedback from the mayor. I'm going to schedule this for discussion of council at an executive session. And Gary suggested that too. And it's a real property transaction. I believe we can do that. Not that we're trying to hide the ball from the public, but there is some sensitivity on land, on real estate transactions like that. And anything we do is going to have to be approved here in this public meeting. But I will schedule that for a discussion at the next executive session, just to let everybody know what's going to save me having to send this out. So, Mayor, that's all I had. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds good. Just
Mr. Hawker, did you yourself and the mayor take up the Roads and Water District on their offer to meet?
We did.
And?
We met.
You have any positive results?
It was cordial.
Cordial. Thank you.
yes.
Mayor can add to that.
Well, we did meet. I was actually disappointed in the lack of urgency for a meeting, because I'm sure, as you recall, last council meeting, it seemed to be very urgent that we meet, and that's why we went into the executive session, as you recall, because they had all sorts of conditions. I promptly responded to them the next day for a meeting, and they tentatively scheduled out, a couple of weeks. And actually, after a few more calls, we got them to commit to a meeting, and Mr. Hawker and myself attended about 45 minutes, and it was cordial, and they wanted to talk water. So we talked water and suggested they put anything in that we might be interested in writing back to us. And I haven't heard anything more from them. So, how's that?
Thank you.
I think at that meeting I got to be the bad guy and Mr. Hawker was the nice guy.
Is that right?
Yeah, that we did the good guy, bad guy routine. I'm not sure. Any questions of Mr. Hawker for council? Okay. We then ordinance for adoption. I'm sorry, Joan. Did you have anything by? No. I don't mean to leave you out.
Thanks.
Okay. Ordinance by adoption. We have in front of us an ordinance number 2011-16, an ordinance of the City of Lincoln City adopting provisions relating to development in oceanfront areas, amending ordinance number 84-02 as amended, and amending Lincoln City Municipal Code, Chapter 17.47.
I'm going to read the title again. It's slightly different. I'm looking at the actual ordinance. This is ordinance number 2011-16, an ordinance of the City of Lincoln City adopting provisions relating to development in natural hazard areas, amending ordinance number 84-02 as amended, and amending Lincoln City Municipal Code, Chapter 17.47.
Now, as you may recall, this has been the ordinance that we've been discussing over the last numerous council meetings. And as I recall, Mr. Townsend, perhaps you could help refresh our memories. As we were working through this, it came to light, I think last meeting, that we were getting into the plan. We were trailing into areas that needed a lot more attention than just this ordinance.
There were areas that needed more attention and also that were outside the scope of the notices that we sent out. So.
That was it. Okay. And so at that direction, as we discovered that, we pared back this ordinance to a narrower scope.
Right.
Okay. If you could, the one thing, again, and I don't recall it, but on page 2 of the ordinance, this gets back to the question that we had a lot of discussion around of who pays for additional studies in that first paragraph. Specifically, at the bottom of that first paragraph, all costs incurred by the city to review the development are responsibility of the applicant.
Again, that's something that's in the comprehensive plan. So to take that out, we have to revise the comprehensive plan.
Well, that's where I want to make sure. So by passing this ordinance with that in there, we can then go to the comp plan, because we are going to be working on the comp plan. Is that?
Yes.
Do you have any idea of timing on that? Because this is a hot button for some.
Yeah. I don't have a plan worked out yet. What we try to do is twice a year do these kinds of amendments, and we haven't put together what the first set for this coming year would be, but this would be one of them. So it would be easily in the first half of this year.
So it would be in 2012, though. This would be scheduled,
yes,
the comp plan 2012.
Yeah. And I just want to remind everybody that that language is not new. That's been in, for
been in there
15 years or more. So.
Okay. While we've got Mr. Townsend, any kind of questions? Because this was the ordinance after working through and came to this point. Okay.
Mr. Townsend, on page 4 of the ordinance, under compliance, third sentence, at the time of footing inspection, or if no footing inspection is required, is it possible to permit a development that is not going to have footings?
Sure, you could have an expansion of existing building that it doesn't need new footings, for example. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Sprague?
I just want to be sure that we have the wherewithal to amend the comp plan so that we can perhaps change the wording, or even be able to take that one sentence out of that paragraph that the mayor mentioned, the all costs incurred by the city, the responsibility of the applicant. I think that my concern is that city could decide that they want to do an extensive study and that sort of thing and find out it wasn't necessary and then charge the applicant for that. And I just think we need to protect the applicant a little better than what this thing reads.
Yeah, I agree, and we will make that a priority to make that change.
And we'll have, and you will include that in your recommendations for the changes for the comp plan?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Other questions, clarifying as you read through one last time? Okay. Hearing none, then, I'd entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 2011-16, an ordinance of the City of Lincoln City adopting provisions relating to development in natural hazard areas, amending ordinance number 84-02 as amended, and amending Lincoln City Municipal Code, Chapter 17.47. Roll call vote, please.
Norikis?
Yes.
Sprague?
Yes.
Quant?
Yes.
Mayor Anderson?
Yes.
Eggleton? Yes. Ellingson?
Yes.
And Ward?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Takes care of that. At this time, again, we're back to comments from citizens present. One last opportunity to raise an issue. No sign up at this. You can just come forward. Okay. Hearing none. Then we're down to comments from city councilors. Councilor Ward.
No, I don't have anything.
Happy holidays to you, sir. Councilor?
No, I'm good. If particularly if you have children and you're driving around looking at Christmas lights, we put our at the Sandcastle Motel, we're right behind the Nell Scott Strip, we put our Christmas ship up this year, and you might find it worthwhile just to stop by and take a look at it. You're certainly welcome to, and it would be our privilege to have you do that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've enjoyed being here this evening.
Any particular night you're serving hot chocolate or anything that we should come by?
No, there's coffee on all the time. I'm going to have to check about the hot chocolate. But
I'm only kidding.
no,
but the lights are great.
That wouldn't be hard to do. So consider it done. As a matter of fact.
Thank you, Councilor.
We'll get that job done.
Councilor Rikus?
Absolutely.
What might you have? Nothing. All right. Councilor Quant, what's with you?
I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And be safe and sane.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I got a comment. I agree.
Up here to the mic, if you could.
I agree with Mr. White that was up here. It's easier to get to sign for buy a weapon and go through background check than go through this or form.
Okay. Thanks for your comments. Councilor Sprague.
Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
All right. Well, I've got some. So it's much too early to be leaving. What is it, 7:30? For those of you who don't get the Oregonian, I just want to bring your attention to the December 7th front page of the Oregonian. We had Lincoln City, bright and shiny, paying tribute to one of our own citizens, Ed Johann, as a survivor of Pearl Harbor, and a very nice picture right on the Oregonian. And I see him often around town, and it's great. So thank you, Ed. Also, I have to report that if you haven't noticed that we've lost a long-standing business in town this past weekend. The Hilltop Restaurant has closed. A combination of things, not just the economy, but it's always sad to see a business that's been here as long as that one has will no longer be with us. Important to me, commercial crabbing season starts the 15th, so, the seafood fish shop should start reflecting nice, fresh crab. I would like to take an opportunity to talk a little bit, and maybe on this, the committees. I think there were some comments from citizens, record vacancies. I would point out to the citizens that we've been batching vacancies on committees and holding them open for a longer period of time so that citizens had the opportunity to complete applications and get them in. So as people's term expires, and they do, or they resign, we pull them all forward. So if you're reading advertisements or the website, they're open, but that doesn't mean that we don't have plenty of applications. For example, Planning Commission, I'll tout Planning Commission, currently has 2 seats that will be open at the end of the year, December 31st. Currently, we have 5 applicants on these 2 seats. None from the urban growth boundary, by the way, of which they're eligible. So as much as I share concerns expressed by some people of background checks and, the paper, I would ask them for a little tolerance. I think we're working through this whole process of interviews, background checks, and finding ways so it can be much more comfortable and understanding. And that's why forms have been changed since we came up with this idea first quarter of this year. The other is we're trying to get the committees to perhaps even look at their value, or perhaps it's not background checks or the paper at all of why there are or aren't applicants, that it might be the purpose of the committee is less than stellar. So there's a challenge out there for all of us to take a look at the purpose, get involved, pay attention a little bit of what's going on, and talk to the counselors. Councilor Eggleton, I understand you and Councilor Sprague were pretty instrumental in even this latest revision of the form. So, thank you for getting it on, a little bit easier to have people understand the process. We'll get there.
Just a comment. I'm still not comfortable with the form, but it was explained to me by our HR director that the wording that's in the first 2 or 3 paragraphs of that form is required by the government or whoever it is. I'm not comfortable with that, but if we're required to have it that way, there's not much we can do about it.
And at least we've gone further to clarify right above the signature that we're just doing a background check.
Yeah, I think that still freaks some people out, and I'm not happy that it does. But
let me dig into that a little bit more.
Sure. Okay.
I think you got accurate information, but that doesn't mean that there can't be additional changes that we're still in compliance.
And we're morphing through this. I think we've made a lot of progress, and I can tell you from already experience, and I hope the council is feeling the same way, the interviews have been great. Talking to citizens about their desire to serve on a committee and what their expectations are and all the kind of things. It's certainly very valuable for us as counselors, and hopefully the same for the citizens. So we're benefiting that way. It's already been mentioned that January 28th, 2012, there's the bike and walking open house plan right here. So keep that on the calendar.
Oh, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I would be remiss if I did not thank Mr. Hawker right now and whoever he has working for him relative to sweeping the streets. The streets, I can't believe the difference it's made to have the streets, the gravel swept in the areas that you ride bicycles at.
I'll pass that along, but it only took me 30 seconds, so I wasn't involved beyond that.
That's one of those things that, we didn't have to go to ODOT, and nobody had to, I'm sure it costs the city money, but thank you.
It doesn't cost that much, so.
It's unbelievable.
The only other thing, thank you, Gary. The only other thing I have is I actually attended a meeting today in Newport where the folks that are involved with Lincom, the 911 dispatch, were meeting with Willamette Valley Communications Center out of Salem, and we have a relationship with Willamette Valley Communications, but they were talking about finding, a potential merger, consolidating 911 and dispatch services into perhaps the valley, into the Salem center. So it was very interesting, good crowd, a lot of good information, and I think that's something we've raised as well. As you may or may not know, Lincoln County has 3 dispatch centers. The state of Oregon would like to see that down to 3 to 5 in the whole state. So there's a lot of move afoot to consolidate. So that is one area that continues to be a topic. With that, hopefully we won't need to meet again until 2012, and hope all the citizens remain healthy as well as yourselves. We stand adjourned.